Hi, this is Joe Galimo from Impact Group. Just wanted to let everybody know we're going to give some people that are still showing up maybe 1 minute or two to join us, and then we'll get the meeting started.
Looks like my camera's bugging out here again.
Okay, thanks for your patience. Let's get started here today. So our webinar is on AI business enablement, and we're going to talk about how to go from process modeling to agentic solutions. Let's see, here's the agenda for the meeting. Quick commercial message about Impact Group, of course, and then we'd like to talk about, what the state of the state is in terms of AI projects and why they unfortunately are failing more than not. Talk about business process improvement using AI. I want to introduce some high impact agents that we've developed and go through some use case examples, provide a couple of quick demos, and then Q&A. If you have any questions at any point, please feel free to wave or just interrupt, no problem. So here is a quick glance at Impact Group. We are a full service organization. So, the group on the side is who's represented here today from a consulting services standpoint. We also have a technology services group that's an MSP and can pretty much handle anything on the technology side. Here's some of our clients that we worked with over the past few years, just to give you an example. Anything from, Fortune 50 companies all the way down to startups. So pretty much a wide range of clients. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just some examples of some of the projects we've done over the past few years. And so let's just move on then. So quick introductions. I'm Joe Galimo with Impact Group, one of the partners here, and I've been working with AI for about 18 months now. We've done a number of projects for a lot of our clients, including Fortune 50 retailer, Fortune 500 semiconductor industry company, and again all the way down to smaller mom and pop shops in the food service industry. And I also wanted to ask Yen and Manpreet to introduce themselves quickly. Yen, if you would start us off. Yen, I can't hear you.
Is that better?
There we go.
Okay, Jens Han, AI solutions architect, worked at many large Fortune 500 companies, do a lot of stuff in the cloud. So here, developing AI solutions and agents. So that's what I do.
And Manpreet?
Yep. My name is Manpreet Chandy. I'm an AI engineer working for the past 3 years or so here on AI integrated applications.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about AI projects. I'm sure you've heard some of this in the news. MIT just came out with a report saying that despite a very, very large investment, 95% of GenAI projects have not delivered a P&L result. And only 5% of AI tools, custom AI tools, actually reach production. In other words, scale beyond a pilot phase, which is really a kind of a sorry state of affairs. And they did some analysis and they realized that many projects fail because they're either it's a brittle AI solution, it's misaligned with existing workflows, or there just isn't the integration. So basically what people are doing is creating AI point solutions, and they're kind of saying, well, we need, the board of directors is asking us if we have an AI strategy or not, so let's just do something. And that usually is not the best way to approach this type of technology, or really any technology in general. As you can see with McKinsey, 70% of digital transformations fail, exact same situation. PwC reports that 75% of transformations don't achieve ROI. And of those that fail, 70% is due to lack of user adoption and behavioral change. These are all people issues. They're not technology issues. So we're going to talk about what to do about that. You may have seen this. It just came out last week. Gartner for CIO, 60%, 64% of tech execs plan to deploy agentic AI in the next 12 to 24 months because it has more potential to generate ROI than generative AI does. I'm not going to go through all this. You can read that yourself. But success requires a business-aligned AI roadmap with clear, measurable value targets, workforce upskilling initiatives, and robust data management and governance. That's one of the key points we'll be making during our presentation here today. AI ROI analysis is really critical to making sure these are successful engagements. You may have also seen this in the news. Forward deployment engineers, Palantir has made a whole business model around creating integrated technology stacks for AI, includes analytics, workflows, automation features, and specialized agents. Lowe's, for example, is creating a digital replica of its global supply chain. But they've got the scale to be able to do that type of thing, and they're getting tremendous benefits from it. You may have seen this also. OpenAI announced a month or two ago that they are embedding forward deployed engineers, FDEs, inside their large clients. And they're not there to code. They're really there to embed, to map high leverage problems, develop full stack solutions around their frontier models. The interesting thing is, in order to engage this team of forward deployed engineers, it's a $10 million investment upfront, and then it builds from there. So what we're trying to do here today is help people understand, what is going on at these levels and how can we scale this down to a reasonable, more affordable level. Essentially, it's process improvement for the masses, right? So we don't have 10 million. I don't expect you guys would have 10 million. How can we take advantage of all this technology? So here are some of the key points that we'll be talking about today, really designing for adoption, and this is true of any project, right? Again, I'm not going to go through the sub bullets, but you know this, you probably understand this intuitively. The solution has to work for the people that are going to use it. So that's really where it starts. And once you start on a process improvement journey, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at the process, document the process, and then improve the process before you start looking at any type of technology application. It doesn't make sense to pave the cow paths, right? We're going to create better new cow paths, and that's what we're going to automate. And validate the ROI before you build, right? We'll talk about this in more detail, so that you're going to have a successful engagement, assuming it goes as planned. And finally, you can't ignore the training and the change management of the workflow piece. As we just saw, that's been some of the key issues that people have with the success of these engagements. So let's talk about how we're going to use AI in the business improvement process. So from a workflow automation standpoint, the key objective, of course, is to reduce costs and improve quality using AI. And the thing that you have to really understand is, where is AI strong and where is human input still strong? AI is very good, as I'm sure you know, pattern recognition, speed of responsiveness, getting scale that humans can't achieve in such a small time frame. But humans are still key for the strategy. How are we going to use these AI tools? How are we going to reorganize this process to make it more efficient? So it's the judgment that humans bring to the table, and frankly, also the empathy, which is really what's required for good, solid change management. We're going to utilize a holistic end-to-end approach, not just an AI point solution. That's where companies get into trouble. We're going to apply an appropriate AI solution at each step in the process, and we'll talk about each one of those steps specifically in a few minutes here. And knowing what's possible and practical, that's what a human brings to the table. And then they use the AI as a tool to address those issues, not the other way around. We'll talk about this too, but providing training at pretty much all levels of the organization on how AI works, what it's going to do, how people can use it for their own personal productivity so they don't feel like they're left in the dust, is a great way to calm uncertainty and improve acceptance of these solutions. And then engaging with end users on personal productivity tools, as I just said, is a way to do that. So this is a current process modeling approach. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this. We're going to define the current process, in other words, the as is. We're going to do that through interviews and workshops, and we're going to document it using Visio. And then we're going to identify improvements. Usually that's through surveying people that are being interviewed and in the workshops and then asking them to grade the aspects of the process and looking for improvements. We're going to develop a roadmap on how we're going to create the new process, and we're going to group logical units together, identify some quick wins, low-hanging fruit opportunities, and then we're going to prioritize those by the benefit and the cost, develop a change management plan, implement the solution, right? Pretty basic stuff. So that's the current approach. And here's our redefined approach using AI for process modeling. So the first thing we're going to do differently is we're going to document the process still at level 2, but we're going to use mermaid diagrams instead of Visio. Visio creates great images, but it can be hard for AI tools to access that data because they have to do OCR and understand what's going on with the image. If you use a mermaid diagram, you still get that same level of Visio from a image standpoint, but it's stored as a text, so it's accessible. And so we're going to go through each one of these in more detail, right? So the green items are where we're going to inject AI into the process, and we'll talk through these. So one thing that you should know, and there are so many topics that could potentially be covered in this webinar. One thing that is helpful is creating a custom Copilot or a custom GPT. And so let's see, you've got a. So I've got a document that I will send after the meeting, and basically it's how to create a custom GPT. I don't know if some of you may have done this already, in which case you would be familiar with it. Others may have not done this. So basically you want to go to, I'm using ChatGPT as an example. You just want to go to ChatGPT. In the left-hand column, there's a GPT section, and you can explore and then create will be in the upper right-hand corner. It's going to ask you to fill in these fields under configure, the name, the description, the instructions, and the conversation starters. Essentially, what you're doing is creating a environment where ChatGPT is going to have memory, and it's going to remember what you want to do, and it's going to have custom instructions that you've created on how you want things done. So here's an example, and again, I'll send this all to you. As a process analyst and Six Sigma inspired consultant, this is what we are trying to accomplish with this GPT. Here are the instructions, right? Ask for context, develop the model, right? All these things. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail. And then from a conversation starter standpoint, that's what will appear on the screen after you finish the GPT. I've also got a craft prompt framework for people to use when it comes to then prompting the GPT. Okay, so hopefully that's, I know we went through that very quickly, but that when we say a custom GPT or a custom Copilot, the process is basically the same. If you're using Microsoft Copilot or Copilot Studio, it's very similar. I just happen to use ChatGPT as the example here. And we're going to apply the GPT when we want to use AI to solve a specific problem. Hopefully that's clear. So going back to the modeling then, from a definition and process modeling standpoint, we're still going to define the as-is state, and we're going to, I ask people to identify opportunities for improvement and grade the existing processes. Where it starts to get different is now we can capture those whiteboard images where people have been in a workshop and somebody's capturing their input. And typically those are translated into swim lanes. We can use a custom GPT to actually take that information from a screenshot and create the mermaid workflow diagrams. And again, mermaid stores the process models as markdown text so that AI can access it more easily. We don't have to worry about a Visio image that has to be created and then reverse engineered in order to access that information. We're going to want to make sure we address the use cases. And then a custom GPT, which we just talked about, is used to recommend process flows. So once we get this workflow, we're going to input that into our custom GPT that we created, and we're going to ask it to make recommendations on how process improvement can occur. And when we go through all of these steps, I'm going to have an example that I'll just walk through briefly and then send you afterwards so you can see in more detail exactly how this works. Just add a note here for more complex processes. Opportunities for AI agents are identified, so things that can be automated as a specific part of an overall workflow, or it could be the agent is the solution, in and of itself. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then inter-process agents are built out as part of the process. So if there's an agent that's identified at this stage, then as you're building out the solution, you'd create that agent as well. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to press on then. From a process improvement standpoint, so we're going to use this custom GPT to assess that as-is process. So again, we've documented the process. We're going to upload it to our custom GPT, and we're going to ask it various things. Okay, so tell me about this process. How can I simplify it? How can I standardize it? How can I remove non-value added steps? These are the types of things that we're going to ask this through this GPT when we do the process assessment, to come up with ways that we can do this. So can we consolidate handoffs? Do we need to create a RACI diagram? And this is one of the great ways to use a solution like this is to create a RACI diagram. That can be a lot of work, right? And if you ask the tool to do it, it'll be done in moments versus somebody doing that by hand. You get the idea, right? We're going to want to clean the inputs and make sure there's a clear definition for the process. When is it completed? Create any templates we might use. You can ask it to do quality and readiness checks. And where do we need a human in the loop specifically to make sure that we are getting the judgment that we need in a process step, and when can we automate it? Okay. And so the result is going to be standard operating procedures, data contracts, measurable KPIs. Those are the types of things you want to come out of this process improvement effort. So again, during the automation process, we do an evaluation, and we're looking for ways that we can add agents. And maybe there's an overall process. Maybe that process is a large, order to cash process. So it's going to expand across a large part of the organization. And maybe we're going to use, NetSuite. Wish it was Netflix. NetSuite to automate that, or maybe Dynamics, some ERP system. But as we're doing that, maybe there's a way to automate the data input. And so anytime there are tasks that are repetitive, rules-based, or data-driven, that'll make them strong candidates for automation or augmentation by AI agents. And again, this is part of the overall assessment to make sure that we're automating as much as possible and where it makes sense, not just for the sake of automation. So we're going to score these based on transaction volume, repetitiveness, complexity, selection criteria, anything that's got a high volume and very repeatable with low, if it's just data entry, in other words, I'm opening up a spreadsheet, I'm opening up an email, and there's a PDF attached that's got an order acknowledgement, and I do that 50 times a day, that's a ripe opportunity for automation by an agent, right? It's very repeatable. There's potential for error. It's relatively low complexity. We know the data is going to be good because it's coming out of a document. And so we can take that off of somebody's plate and just create an agent that's going to do that. And we'll talk more about that too. So here we're going to document potential opportunities and utilize again this custom tool to develop a pattern, right? So what's the knowledge we need? What do the documents look like? What's the process that we're going to orchestrate? And the output is a number of agents opportunities. The third thing, and this really, what we're trying to do is address PwC's report that 75% just don't achieve ROI up front. I'm sorry, shame on the people that are doing that. really, you need to have some idea what you're doing, your transformation is going to achieve the ROI. And if you haven't done your homework, the odds are, you're not going to hit the mark. So the idea is to, again, utilize this custom GPT to help you figure out what is my ROI. And all of these are standard ROI calculations. What are the volumes? How much time do we spend? What kind of error rates are we expecting? There isn't anything magical here. The magic is actually doing it, right? And so we're going to say, okay, for our company, our decision gates are net present value greater than 0, or maybe it's greater than 10, or some number, whatever your company uses. And the payback is less than 12 months or 24 months. But if you're done your process analysis work and you've done your process improvement work and you ask the tool to tell you what kind of ROI analysis you're going to get, and it doesn't come back with appropriate numbers in this decision gate, then you either need to defer or to simplify or to somehow ask for more feedback, more process improvement efforts, so that you get to a positive analysis with your ROI. And then, of course, later on, once the process is in place, you're going to want to revisit that and make sure that the expected results have been achieved. The next step is developing the process improvement roadmap. This is another opportunity to utilize a custom GPT, or if you have a if your new process is going to be implemented in NetSuite, that's one thing. Then you don't necessarily need to do this phase. But if it's something that you're going to automate in a more standalone environment, maybe you don't have a large ERP, or you have a roll your own ERP system that was developed 20 years ago that you want to treat as a black box, and you want to do this outside of that environment, you're going to want to look at what technologies are available. This was an actual assessment that we did for a client, and it came back and said, for this specific case, the Azure Forms Recognizer is probably the best tool. Or Syntax would have been another potential option. And you can refine this type of an assessment from there, all using this custom GPT. You also have an opportunity to develop a cloud architecture. The approach that we take is, when we're developing AI solutions from a toolset standpoint, typically we're going to use Copilot for the initial ideation, like we just talked about, process improvements, toolset selections. Once we get a plan in place, we're going to take that to the next step. We'll talk about that. We're also going to use Copilot, like Microsoft Copilot in this case, for personal productivity solutions. Again, that helps people understand how the AI tools work and what they can really do for you. And it gets them to buy into a process when it's a more broader departmental or maybe division or company level solution that's been developed in AI. For specific solutions that are kind of medium in size and medium in complexity, a Copilot Studio might be a good way to do that, to develop a low code solution, or custom GPTs, again, like we've been talking about all along, are used when it's a more comprehensive or complex approach. And then we're going to develop custom agents where appropriate. In terms of implementing the solution, this is where generative AI cloud development is just taken off. It's really something that's just created a lot of buzz and picked up a lot of steam in the last probably 12 months. It's basically using cloud-based development environment to create code, concepts, and ideas generated by AI to solve the business problems. So we're going to use a tool like this. You enter the requirements and the problem. It's going to generate solutions and an architecture if that's what we use as input, and then it's going to implement and generate code. And you can again read through this yourself. And we're also going to create the test pipeline and determine if it's met, and if not, we're going to go back and with corrections. I don't know if you've had a chance to try any of these tools, but for application development, some of the most popular tools right now are Cursor or Claude Code. I've used Cursor, and it's really kind of just amazing and frankly a little bit unbelievable at the iterative ability to go back and you'll say, okay, I want a solution that does this. and it'll create something and you say, no, I really want it to do this, or I want you to add this feature, or I want you to change, if it's a web app you're developing, I want you to change the screens, change the color pattern palette, or move, some buttons around, and it just does it. And then it'll test it. And if it finds any issues, it'll fix the issues. It's an excellent tool for that purpose. And some of this, again, as we talked about earlier, change management is critical to the success of any project, really, whether it's business transformation, digitalization, ERP implementation. But it's really critical here because not only are you having people that have to deal with a new process, but it's also a new technology. And frankly, a lot of people are still a little bit wary of, what is this AI thing? Is it going to take my job? Am I going to be outsourced by this AI solution? And you may have heard this, but the phrase these days is your job won't be replaced by AI. It'll be replaced by a person that knows how to use AI. And so the idea is to get people to understand, okay, if I'm making myself more valuable to the company if I know how to use an AI solution. And so training around prompting, Copilot usage, and anything role-based is really critical to get people to buy into these solutions, and helping them discover how it can work for them, right? Which is, again, these personal productivity solutions. And you have to provide time for people to experiment, training at all levels. So from an executive level, how are these solutions going to help us, down to the worker level, which we talked about here. And it really, from a lot of people will have a champion when it comes to change management around a new solution or an ERP system. That same concept applies to an AI champion. And you obviously build that into the culture if you aren't already doing that. Typically you'd have KPIs placed on an executive dashboard for other projects, and this is no exception. You definitely want to get the executive leadership from the top. And all of this in combination will create a culture of success that will help make these tools successful. A lot of, this is kind of blocking and tackling, so I'm not really going to go through this in detail. But when we implement a solution, it's the typical, okay, we're going to implement it. What's our plan? How do we roll it out? How do we make sure it's being adopted? And then what's our rollback plan if it doesn't work as we expected? And then how do we do the post go live monitoring and management to make sure that it's being used properly and address any issues if it's not? So that's the overall approach. Again, we're kind of looking for how do we use AI in the process improvement process. We talked about how we have been doing things up until this point, and now how we're going to use AI to improve that improvement process. I was going to do a demo using a medical device industry application. It turned out that that was going to be a little too complex. So what we've done is we've created some high impact agents. And I'd like to walk you through those. These are solutions that are when you've got something you can get your arms around, so to speak, like that example that I used about getting PDF documents in an email. What are we going to do with those types of things? If you've got a broad order to cash process, that's more of a, using the process we just talked about earlier, that's going to be implemented in an ERP system. That's not the target for these agents. So here's our approach. Again, the key objective is to reduce cost, improve quality using AI. We've developed agents to perform process modeling. These agents were trained on many, many years of consulting experience. So we've been around for 34 years. We've been doing process modeling really since the start of the company. That was one of the reasons why Impact Group was created years ago. And so we're building these agents on top of that consulting experience. And there's a series of agents. The output from the first one cascades to the second, which cascades to the third. You'll see what I mean in a minute. And this approach is really best utilized for processes where there's a well-defined scope. Like I said, if it's an end-to-end, a company-wide solution, this may not be the best approach. But if you've got something where you want to create an agent to address a specific issue, this is a great solution. And it's used to augment the development and the testing process. So here's some examples, just so we're kind of on the same page in terms of ways to use these agents. Let's say you want to do an invoice automation. So we're going to ingest the invoice. This is the same kind of use case as the one I mentioned a minute ago. We're going to extract the information probably through an OCR process where we're going to read through an attached PDF that's got the invoice information. It's going to go through a validation, a three-way match, and we're going to post it to our ERP system. And then if there are exceptions that the AI tool can't handle, that's going to get routed over to an AP analyst. Maybe there's a workflow where anything above a certain dollar amount or a number of parts or some clip levels are routed to the AP analyst for confirmation. That all can be created with an agent. One thing that we've done for another client is create an onboarding workflow automation process. So as people get through the interviewing process and they've been made offers, there's a whole series of steps that have to occur. What do we have to do before that person starts? So all the tasks are listed in one area. What does day 1 look like? What does day 30 look like? So we perform all of these different activities, and those are all scheduled and they're assigned. And then as people perform the activities themselves, they can check that off. And then supervisors can monitor the progress. And this is another kind of decision tree approach where, okay, as soon as these things are done, that's going to go to the second person. As soon as they're done, it's going to go to the third person. So it's a cascading effect. That's a great way to use an AI agent and frankly, this is just like a large, the Workday, does this type of thing. If you've got 1,000 or 10,000 employees, Workday is a great solution. If you've got 500 or 200, Workday is probably serious overkill, and this is a great approach. Sales enablement, that's another tool we've developed where Salesforce wants to get information. They want to draft proposals. They want answers on product questions. They have just met with a client. They want to understand between these 3 products, which one should I be recommending based on the following information that I captured. And that's a sales enablement tool that a salesperson can use, in some cases, right in front of the client to really make sure they're recommending the right solution, or in some cases in a back office manner. And then there's handoff to a CRM tool can be created as well. And this is one we're going to talk about in more detail. So there's a product compliance tracking, and we'll talk about this, but well, let's just go ahead and go to the next screen. So actually, let's see. So here's the product compliance tracking. So here are the agents that I just talked about, right? So we've got a problem intake agent. It's going to define the problem, the challenges, the proposed solutions. It's going to work with you to get that all defined, understand what resources are required and the expected benefits, and then perform an ROI analysis. It's going to define the existing process flow, identify opportunities for improvement, and opportunities to use agents. Okay, so that's the second high impact agent. The third one is an AI technology consultant agent, where it's going to create the workflow diagram in Mermaid. It's going to list the supporting applications and dependencies, the systems and technologies required, the architecture, data flows, integrations. And then the fourth agent is going to create a cloud architecture, including service mapping and architecture diagrams. And the fifth agent is going to do the technical documentation that's needed to create a successful solution. And once again, AI is used to augment the development, as we talked about before, with Cursor or Claude Code, and the testing steps, as we talked about. So here's an example of each one of these. I will send this to you after the meeting. For the intake agent, this particular use case is a food service company has various products, that they need to keep from a compliance standpoint. Labeling, basically, right? When I worked for IBM in Rochester, we had material safety data sheets for the chemicals that were used on the plant floor that had to be kept up to date. So I was a entry-level engineer. One of my jobs was to make sure those material safety data sheets were current. These guys have the same type of requirement where they have to maintain food labeling and make sure that's current for their employees to use. The challenges are it's a tedious process. You can imagine how that would work. And there's no centralized system, limited visibility for management over how well you're doing from a compliance standpoint. And you're depending on the staff for follow-ups, which is error prone, for extracting data, which is error prone. So the proposed initiative was to implement an AI-powered system that would track expiration dates, send automated reminders to vendors when those new labels come in in an email or through a portal, to interrogate the email or get the updates from the portal, extract the data, validate the data is compliant with what we're looking for, and then upload it into our system. And then we're going to provide a dashboard for the internal team and the leadership to be able to track the activity. And here are the expected benefits. Again, it's a pretty straightforward use case, so it's pretty straightforward in terms of the benefits. We're going to reduce manual labor, improve compliance, enhance vendor accountability, become audit ready, much more so. Here's some ROI analysis based on the information that we fed into it, the number of people that were involved in doing this today, which they had up to 3 people at any one time doing this. And we assumed or the tool developed a 45% ROI and a 9-month break-even point. So this is obviously a project that you're going to probably want to move forward with. Dependencies are a compliance coordinator. You still need an admin person, and you still need a vendor coordinator, but you're going to really offload most of their work to the point where they're really just managing the process, not doing the process. And the potential savings here is pretty significant. So that's the first intake. The second high impact agent is the improvement. And I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail. And like I said, I will send this to you afterwards so you can review it at your leisure. But so the second piece is the process improvement agent. We're going to talk about and interface with this agent, and it's going to make recommendations for how do we save time? How do we save money? Where can we introduce agents into the process? And these are some of the improvements that have been suggested. Okay, so let's create a vendor submission portal, and which we don't have today. Okay, so the vendors can update the information directly into the portal instead of our people doing a cut and paste from a PDF into our portal. Some vendors are going to push back on that. Some of them are going to be compliant with that. But so you still need both sides, but you can probably eliminate 40–50% of your coordination effort through that type of a process. Deploy AI-based document ingestion and data extraction. Centralize the compliance dashboard for monitoring. These are all recommendations that were developed through this process improvement agent. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Others are, a little bit more advanced and maybe things that wouldn't be thought of. So again, I'm going to go through this quickly. Here's the technology consultant agent. So we're going to do this analysis. And here's the solution overview. Here is the business process flow in Mermaid. Here are the recommended systems and technologies. And here's the supporting software applications. Here's the final solution in Mermaid, technical architecture, data flow and integration. You get the idea, right? So that's information going to cascade to the fourth agent, which is the cloud architect, which is then going to go to the next step. So it's going to, perform the service mapping that we talked about, the resource list, what type of resources are we going to need, and so on and so forth. Here's the Mermaid diagram with the architecture. And then finally, the technical documentation agent. And by the way, we'll be building out more agents over time that will continue this agent process. But this is going to provide the documentation that typically doesn't happen, as I'm sure well aware, in a lot of process development efforts. Any questions about that? Okay. So I'd like to turn it over to Yen and Manpreet and ask them to give us some quick demos.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. So you guys hear my screen? Cool. Screen ready here. This one. Share. Okay. Is it sharing? Are you guys seeing the shared screen at all, Joe?
Hang on one second. There we go.
Okay, guys. So this process that to get from an idea to technical documents, I've seen a lot of companies. It takes somewhere in the 3 to 6 month range. And what we're trying to do is actually expedite it. We're trying to do it at high quality, but also bring in expertise for in the form of AI that helps you kind of one, create new ideas, and two, do it at higher quality and also at better documentation speeds. So what we're going to do is work through an example here. I've actually entered one here that's a very common use case that we have. This involves automating invoices. So you have the problem of invoices paid through manual labor. You have to essentially read that off. And then what you want to put in there in order to kind of determine a return on investment is the amount of money that you're paying per year. The output, like what's the volume, how many invoices can you do per week, the turnaround time, because those are the things you want to improve upon, and then typically the error rate. So these are all kind of metrics that you can improve upon. So this one's really short here. And so what this is going to help is essentially try to develop the problem statement so that, the note-taking, occurs quicker. And so what we've done is we put a very opinionated view. This is essentially experts putting their viewpoint and staff members putting their viewpoint of how this should look. So essentially, this is written as a problem statement. Here's the challenges, proposed initiatives, expected benefits, return on analysis, return on investment, and then resource dependencies. Okay. And then from there, what you can do is, you feed that into the next thing, which is looking at, how can we improve that? So essentially, the next agent would be like an improvement agent. Okay. And then they can make some recommendations. We'll go ahead and skip this one just for the sake of time here. But we have an improvement agent, and Joe showed an example of what that looks like. The next one after that is looking at what are the AI architecture or AI solutions that can be used for this type of thing. So in this case here, let's say we paste this in here. What we want to know is actually, what are the technologies or, the kind of solutions that can be presented. And so this agent has expertise in AI. So I programmed this agent essentially with my expertise from years of consulting, and it comes up with different solutions for this process, right? So here it kind of gives you it rewrites the problem kind of in a shorter form, solution overview. It talks about different options. This includes computer vision, ML-based validation, building a dashboard. It draws a diagram. And the great thing about Copilot is it renders the mermaid diagram. You don't have to leave the thing for it. So this helps kind of ideate the solution better. So it's like a little stuck here. Oops. Wait. I was just having a little time struggling here. But anyway, so you can see that it's generating the diagrams. It's talking through the systems. So this process, you would have to meet with an AI, specialist or an AI engineer and go through these different ideas. They would have to present these ideas, but it allows you to kind of go through this quicker. And then these are the technical diagrams they need. They need it in a certain language that can be expressed so that they can write the software essentially. And then this is trying to get to those diagrams quicker, right? So for example, this is the technical architecture. You have an OCR engine here, some validation, a workflow engine, and then this is how this would, as a software, would be designed. It talks about the data integration and things like that. And then after that, you essentially put it into the next thing, which is essentially looking at the AI engineering or the Azure consultant, right? So that would be the next step here. Oops. So here in the Azure Cloud Consultant, we essentially programmed or stuck in their expertise into this. And then again, you would paste it from the last one, but for the sake of time, we're just going to put it in here. And then what it will do is actually tell you the technologies from the Azure perspective. If you were on AWS, we would build another one. It's an AWS consultant, solutions architect consultant, and then also for GCP. So whatever cloud you're in, we would just create that solution for that. This is really valuable because these folks are very expensive to consult with, and to try to get an initial analysis or evaluation of that really quickly is really valuable because you're shrinking the time, but also you're reducing the amount of money that it takes for these evaluations. And so if you have a large number of solutions you have to go through, you want to do this pretty quickly, like if you can, to come up with the solution here. So here they've gotten some security stuff and also, and this is all Azure related technologies here. And then, we look through that as experts, but we kind of use these tools to kind of guide, to help kind of, speed it along, I would say. But at the same time, we also, you also can modify it. So based upon your selection of things, and you can ideate within the tool, and then come up with the final, thing, which is the technical documents. And then once you have the technical documents, then you essentially now you can go to any, software development company, present it, get a quote for it, and then and it will also estimate. We will also estimate the amount of money that it would take, the number of hours of engineering time that it takes in order to perform the solution. So, but anyways, those are the aspects of it. But it really it's if you think about the amount of time in a traditional sense, how AI really can improve the quality, but also reduce the time to get to where you need to be in order to not kind of move forward in building the solution. So, if somebody could finish this in like a week, then that shaves them a whole bunch of time from the time, that would normally have taken 6 months or so to get to this point. And then from there, you can go shop around like how much this would cost, because now you've got the technical details written in such granular fashion that you can get a very accurate estimate. And a lot of times what happens is when people go seek software development, they don't write it in enough detail. And so there's a broad range of what that cost looks like because a lot of times software engineers have to sit and actually, flush through those requirements. Like they have to come back and get more information because you haven't, developed it to that detail. So, okay. Anyway, okay. Any questions there? Okay. Okay, back to you, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Okay, so next steps. So takeaways. I will be sending this out after the meeting. We, in our invitation, offered a sample roadmap for moving from envisioning to production with measurable checkpoints. So that'll be one of the documents. We talked about creating a custom GPT. That'll be another one. And then we went through this example of the output of these high impact agents for the food labeling compliance automation work use case. We've also got a special offer. We've got a free 30-minute AI process assessment for any one process if you bring the as is, and we'll map it and we'll provide a high-level ROI and identify agent candidates using our high-impact agents. The output is an opportunity brief and go, no-go criteria. So whether it makes sense to do the project or ways in which it can be changed to make sense. This is available to the first 5 groups that sign up. If you're interested, send me an email to express your interest. And then another special offer, we're doing a 90-minute AI process assessment at a discounted rate, which also includes consultant reviewed process analyst. Sorry about that. So it's using these high impact agents, but it's also got a workflow with one of our consultants to review the workflow and add that human input. So that is our presentation for today. Any comments, questions, anything anybody would like to add at this point? Okay, I'm going to assume that if anybody has any questions, send me an email. I will send you that information, and it'd be easy enough to just respond to that email with any questions you might have, or if you're interested in participating in that offer. Really appreciate your time today, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.